Well, welcome back to the Ropes Family Podcast. Today we have a special episode. We have Donovan here with us today. He's going to be talking about the Southeast Asia trip that they just took. We're going to be kind of doing a debrief on that. And I wanted to ask him some questions on his perspective from the trip from his perspective. So let me turn this down and we'll get right into it. So how did it go? How did the trip go? Have you recovered?
Probably haven't recovered yet. We got in late.
As of recording this, you got in, what, 12 hours ago?
Yeah, something like that. We landed, we were on the tarmac in DFW for 3 hours, 2 hours, something like that, and missed that flight. They put us on others, and it was a rough ending. But yeah, haven't finished recovering. Had other issues. We don't need to go into car issues and stuff. But it's just one of those things you get back from it was a great trip. It really was. And then these things come up, and you just got to keep a perspective. It's just it's just the way things are. Just life. Yeah,
life doesn't stop happening, even though you're on the other side of the world doing mission work. Life keeps happening, and sometimes it just smacks you right in the face when you get back.
It does. That's right. That is right.
So I recorded a podcast with some of the other team members while they were there, and so I want to ask you some of the same questions, just to kind of get your feel of what went on. So the first question I asked them was how did they see God work on this trip, and so how did you see God work on the trip?
Well, I shared this a little bit with them when we debriefed over there. That my perspective is completely different from the others. As the pastor of a church, and as the pastor of this team, even when we're on site, I just look for things that are different. And so, what I was watching, of course, the VBSs that we did and the interaction with the kids. All of those things were important, but I watched the way our group interacted and struggled at times and celebrated at times, and to me, the way I saw God work was using our folks to travel a long distance and to work a little bit outside their comfort zone, and to believe that the things that they're doing are going to make a difference in opening somebody's heart to the love of Christ. And so that was really the God moment. There was a few other things, but that's really what I tried to watch how our group was doing, and not just to make sure they were doing okay, because it's you're tired, it's hot, just all of the physical aspect of this stuff. And so I tried to keep my eyes on them, but also to see how they were responding to the things that we were trying to do, and that was fun to watch. I've interacted with some of them more than others, but this first time for this particular group to go and do this, and so that was a neat thing.
Yeah, man, I hearing stories that Allison was sharing, and it's one of those things. Like, I didn't think about it as you're pastoring the team while you're there. You're still shepherding them while you're there, and that's a cool aspect to hear from, like you were concerned about the team as well as the ministry they were doing. That's really cool to hear.
Well, that was the hardest thing. We haven't talked too much about, we mentioned the ending part of it. We get back to DFW, they separate things out. Allison ends up not even getting on a plane and has to drive back, and you drive halfway there and meet her and all of that. And to me, the hardest thing for me was knowing I'm on a plane coming home and your wife is in a car driving. And that did not sit well with me at all. Yeah. And that's just part of, as the leader, I should have been the one in the car driving. It worked out fine.
Yeah.
But
that's a tough situation. Like we weren't sure what was going to go on, right? Yeah. Like we thought she was going to get on the next plane, or maybe a plane in a couple hours. So why jeopardize everything and overreact when I mean it's and it ended up everything being fine. We're all home. We're all in West Texas now. We're all here.
That's right.
So that's fine. Everybody worked out fine. We only had to go through one crazy storm driving back, and that was it. It's nothing crazy. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that bothered you a lot. Is not, not taking like that role or not being able to I guess shepherd or protect. A team member in that sense.
Yeah, you're not. even though we were in Texas and I knew it was going to be okay, but we're not. We didn't drop people off with family, and that's the end for me. That's the end.
Yeah.
Whenever I see people get with their family and they drive off into the sunset, so to speak, it's that to me that's the end. And so that closure wasn't there until I got home and I saw your text this morning that we've made it, and I was like, okay, now we're done.
I met her at the Quick Trip.
Yeah.
Dropped her off at the airport and met her at the Quick Trip.
Yep.
That's pretty funny. So.
Yep.
All right, so this was kind of a silly question that I asked him was, what was the weirdest food you tried while you were there?
Well, they probably already talked about it. We had rat, and we had water buffalo.
Yeah.
And the rat, I think their rat was better than our rat.
That's kind of what they said. They're like, it's better than we thought.
I mean, ours didn't have bad taste per se, but it actually, I don't know, it was okay, but every bite was full of bones. It's like is this PG-13? They gutted the rat, I guess, and then they just like cut it into 3 pieces. I mean, like straight, there was no head, no tail on it, but the liver, the hearts, and everything had been cut right in half. They were still attached to the rib cage, but as you picked up a piece, it was like, I was like, okay, that's not the way, like the way I would clean a rat. That was not. So anyway, that was a really strange thing to eat. But we did it. They asked if we wanted it, and we said yeah. And then if they go through the trouble of doing it, then obviously you're obligated. But it was interesting. It was a fun group experience, I think, more than anything. Whether it was good or bad, it was just weird, and we went through it together. And everybody in our group tried it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a bonding thing. You've all eaten field rat.
Yeah, that's right. It was good. Grain fed rat.
Yeah, that's what they were saying.
Organic.
Organic, yeah. Instead of alley rat.
Yeah.
It was field rat.
Yep.
So I guess we can get into some of the other questions. So,
sure.
So I wanted to hear from your perspective. What do you think the biggest success of the trip was?
Well, aside from our group and I think the bond that has been created and continues to be created, because they're talking still. We're going to have conversations after the fact. To me, that's a huge success when they can come back here, and even though I know they're tired, you get back home and you share what you saw God do, and then it's like a magnet. People want to be a part of something that's bigger. The whole do hard things, the whole all of those kind of things. We really are drawn to that kind of stuff, and I think our group coming back and being excited about the possibilities and when we may get to go back and all of those things. To me, that's a huge success as far as that side of things go. We did 4 VBSs. 3 of them were pretty successful. One of them fell flat on a lot of levels. And so that was, I think that the VBSs were good. We did the photography thing again. I was really not looking forward to it because last year's it wasn't a fiasco last year, but it wasn't the success that I had these big grandiose schemes last year, and I was not that at all. And so this year we show up and the room's pretty full. And they said there were 9 or 10 people that have never been in that coffee shop before that now we have their connection. And the class itself went pretty well. We did it from a whole different perspective. And even though half the class brought real cameras this year instead of, so that was because we were not even going to do that. But, the whole purpose of this type of mission for us is to build bridges for the team there. When we leave, if the stuff that we did doesn't enhance what they're able to do once we're gone, then what's the point? And I know you can't always see that, but most of those things, they really did create future opportunities for them. They have interested parties that they can reach out to and follow up with. And that's a huge thing. They were pretty pumped about those things as well. The college campus deal where we talked about life in a small town. That room was packed. And I know some of them were there to get extra credit for their classes and stuff like that. But, once again, there were some contacts that were made there, not just with the students, but with a couple of adults. And so that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to gauge success for
Yeah.
those kind of things, because what the team is they're doing is you're there momentarily. You're not there for very long. You're encountering these people for an afternoon or an evening. It's hard to gauge success on that. But like you said, what you're doing is you're providing the word you said, I guess, avenues for Kevin and Lauren.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure I was going to say their name.
Yeah.
For Kevin and Lauren.
We'll just call them K and L.
Yeah, K and L for K and L. To be able to do their work there. We're there to support, not necessarily to do all of the work, but we're there to support and get the work started.
Yeah. That I think that's for so long. You heard people come back from mission trips and they were disappointed. They said, "Well, we did all this stuff, but we didn't lead one person to Christ," and they deemed it a failure. And I think that's short-sightedness. Rarely does a person going into the mission field experience that kind of thing. It does happen, but most of the time, you're there for the team that's on site. They're the ones building relationships, and in most cultures, to follow Christ means to abandon a lot of things. And they're not going to do that based on their 2-day experience with a guy from Texas. That's just not usually the way it works.
Yeah.
And so, it was a big success. One of the things, one more thing then about the successes of the way God worked and what I think I saw. So last year when the team went to the orphanage and held babies, some of those same kids were in there. And so getting to see, they're little kids, so who knows if they recognized it. But our team said, "Oh, did you see that?" And so I think that was kind of neat to see. But definitely when we went and did VBS at this one orphanage that they brought their kids to the one we did last year, those kids remembered us. And so there was a couple of those kids that, I remember last year, and I talked to them, and I tried to talk at them more or less. But anyway, but they remembered us, and that is probably more important in a lot of ways, because they realize these people care enough to come back, and whether it was a success last year or not, they cared enough to come back. And that's what those kids are like, we remember you, that kind of a thing. And so, and our team, they remembered these kids. And so that's a God thing, that you reconnect with somebody that you ministered to before, and you got a chance to do it again. And, with Lord willing, we're going to do it in the future. And so there's going to be more connections. So I think that's a big God moment.
So you mentioned some of it didn't go as well. So what were the kind of the big failures, if there were any? And what did we learn from those experiences?
Yeah. So one of the VBSs, we went to a place, the people group that we worked with, they have no identity, no paperwork. I'm not sure how much we can say who they are, kind of a thing. But they basically been abandoned by the government.
Okay.
And so we planned on going over there. We were told there's going to be about 60 kids show up, and so we had prepped for about 60 or so, and about 100 and something showed up, and so it was overwhelming. And these kids have nothing; they have very little authority figures in their life, so it's a real struggle to maintain any kind of order in that. And so you put them in where I was teaching the Bible story. I had a really strong personality woman that was translating for me. And so my room went really well, for the most part. There were some issues in there as well. But I went outside while they were doing some activities after I finished mine, and the first time, and it was chaos. And you could see it on our leaders' faces. They were like, what is going on? And part of the failure was we didn't have enough translators. The ones that we had weren't dominant enough. We talked about all this on site as well. And there were too many kids. I mean, it was just, everything about it was a setup for struggle. Like you said, I don't know that it was a failure, because we learned that really at the end of the day, success or failure is all dependent upon, are we being faithful, and is there going to be some kind of seed planted? Mm-hmm. So it's probably not a failure in that sense. And then the team that's over there, they watched us and they saw, 3 of the 4 VBSs went really well. And so it wasn't a lack of preparation on our part. And so they had the opportunity, this is the first time to do something out there. They learned or are learning, if we're going to do something with this group, it's going to have to look different. It's going to have to be different. And so it did not have the success that the others had. The kids, they probably had no clue. Mm-hmm. The next group showed up to do something after when we were finished. There's another group coming in that prepared. I don't even know, they were doing something, and so the kids moved into the next phase of things, and they probably never thought one way or another whether ours was good, bad, or whatever. But from our perspective, it was a struggle. Mm-hmm. Our people. I saw it on their faces. I'll post some pictures later. I mean, you could really see it, and so. Failure in the sense that it did not go the way that we had planned. Mm-hmm. You don't know what seeds are planted, but the real success of it is we know our limitations, or we're learning our limitations. Yeah. I learned mine. I'm learning mine last year and this year. I struggle with having somebody translate for me. Mm-hmm. I could, if I'm reading, I'm okay, but when I'm telling the story. So much of what I do, I follow. I tell a story, and you don't stop a story in the middle.
Yeah, be really tough.
Yeah, and so that was a struggle for me to give 2 sentences, and I get momentum going, and whatever it may be, and then to have to stop and let her tell it, and then I'm wondering, is she really telling it right? I mean,
or just keep your train of thought. Where was I?
Yeah, Yeah, and so anyway, like I said, I don't know. Failure may not be the right word, but it was a struggle. Uh-huh. Yeah. And so
I was talking to Allison about this a little bit, and she said maybe, and you kind of mentioned it, how can we minister to that group differently? Like the group after that, I guess they were meeting different kinds of needs, like maybe bringing them food or something, or what could we do next time? Or maybe that's what we could do the next time we go. We just try to go meet their needs instead of give them structure and have them sit down, sit still. Maybe we can go meet their needs and love on them a little bit.
Yeah, I thought about it some, and of course we'll talk to the team that's still over there and about, are they going to keep working with it? I mean, just all of the logistics, because there were over 100, but there are 500 kids at this village, and they turned a lot of kids away. They said we drove off and there were kids bawling because they didn't get to be a part of it. And you really can't go out to where they live. And so it has to be at this place. So there's always going to be that element of things. But if we're going to minister to them, I think we do have to come up with maybe a two-thing strategy. One, I think the Bible story, as long as you've got somebody there that can translate in such a way and maintain the kids' attention, and I think that's the important part. Obviously, I would say that. Yeah. But I think they've got to hear the word. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've got to experience the love that we have to bring. So as I think about it, what can we do? Bible story plus one. Mm-hmm. I think that's really the extent. I don't know that we have the ability to do much more than an hour and a half. Yeah. And maintain focus. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something that can be done.
I have never been there. I don't know like the culture of those kids or anything. I don't know if and this is just kind of me shooting off the hip, I guess, like maybe like a rec camp or like a rec day or something. I mean, I don't, like I said, I don't know.
There's no place to do it. We can't. So we were in this church, and it had a courtyard that was probably 15 by 30, and it was covered. It was hot. Mm-hmm. And then I had the sanctuary room is where I did the Bible story, which was about the same size, but half of it was full of pews. They just moved the pews out of the way. So that's the limits of your space. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you cram 100 kids in there. Mm. And they don't understand. Mm-hmm. Kim tried to teach them a freeze tag type game. Mm-hmm. They didn't get it. They don't play baseball. There's no room for,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest struggle that we have. It's really not even going to be our struggle because honestly, it's going to be on Kevin and Lauren and them working with that pastor and that church to determine is this beneficial to what they're trying to do in that area, or like the church, the group that followed us, they're a nonprofit, but all of the people that they had were pulled in from different evangelical type churches. I don't know per se, so it could just be that maybe we learned a lesson that you can't do everything. And maybe that's what, I don't know, but that's really, it's going to come down to Kevin and Lauren figuring out, is this going to be an area of ministry that we're going to be able to continue, that's going to accomplish within their purposes. So,
and we're just talking about one specific group.
Yeah.
Like the other, because you did what, 4 VBS?
Yeah, we did
right?
4. The other 3 were really good.
Great, yeah. And because it was more structure and it kind of all went well.
Yeah. One thing we also learned was it was too much. And when we first sat down that very first day, Lauren told us, this is a lot. You guys are going to be worn out. And we knew, we were, you're already jet lagged from getting over there. And we knew it was going to be a bunch. I mean, we looked at the schedule. But you never think about the heat, humidity, food, all of those kind of things. And so we've already started talking about when we go back, keeping the same amount of days that we were there for 10 days, but spacing things a little different so that you work hard and then you get some time to just rest, and so, which is what I'm preaching on this Sunday. Anyway, so that's going to be, it's going to be interesting to me over the next, however long, as the mission committee and as we figure things out, what it's going to look like, because there's some different opportunities for us.
And that's kind of what I wanted to ask next. What are our next steps? Like, what is our next step as a church to do to continue to support this? Yeah.
So during our debrief over there, we talked about the connection that we have with the church, and with them, because they're Lauren's grandparents were members of this church, Pete and Charlene, and they're deceased now. They're in glory, and so but there's still that strong connection, and her folks live in Lubbock. And we talked about the sacrifice. We go over there for 10 days. We miss our family, we miss our bed, we miss all of this kind of stuff. But it's not just the missionaries that sacrifice. Their parents are missing their grandkids, and they get to see them twice a year. And so it's not just the missionaries that are sacrificing, it's their entire family. And so we talked about, instead of just praying for Kevin and Lauren and their immediate family over there, their 2 kids, but putting something together so that we remember their extended family that's they're sacrificing as well. And so somehow doing that to benefit them as a church, making our church aware of the sacrifice that missionaries, not just these 2, but missionaries all over the world. One of the things that we did one day was a VBS for the kids of all of the teams that were over there. And so we had 8 or 10 or whatever, and they invited some friends. I can't remember the exact number. And I had the chance to talk to a couple of those kids. Most of them were not teenagers, but there were 2 teenagers. And so I asked them, how long has it been since you've been in the States? And one of them said it's been a couple of years, and the other one said something to that effect. So they haven't seen any of their family, in a couple of years that are back here. And the kids didn't sign up for that. The parents were called into that. And so I think as a church that takes mission serious, I think one of the things that we need to start doing better is lifting up the whole team. They're, the 2 and their family that are over there, but also those that are left behind here, desiring to see their family and all that kind of stuff. And so that's one way. But also, how do we incorporate others into it, which leads into your
Yeah. So I've noticed a couple things in these last couple trips. So actually, the 3 times you've been, it's just been you. You've been the only male that's gone. Well,
for Billy.
besides Billy.
Besides
I mean,
Billy. But he's
so
yeah.
so what do we need to do to get more men to go, or should we just be like, hey, men, come on, step up?
Yeah.
Or I don't know the answer to that. And so what are you thinking?
That's I mentioned that to Kevin too, because when we go to Tohatchee, that's we've had a few ladies that have gone on that, but that's mainly a men's trip because you can get there in a few hours, you can go do your work, and you can come back. And so that's the real struggle for most men is most of them have jobs that don't allow them to take 10 or so days, and be gone. And then if they do that, and what if their wives want to go? What about their kids? I mean, somebody's got to stay behind, and so it's usually the male who has that role here. But I think we've just got to talk about the importance of it and just keep challenging them, like you said. Whether it's true to say step up or not, I'm not sure, because most of the guys I'm talking with, they're doing everything that they can to make ends meet anyway.
Right.
And so is there something that we can do to make it feasible for some men to go to Southeast Asia? I don't really know, but I think if we don't ask those questions, we're not going to find an answer to it. We talked about going over there during the Christmas season. The hard part for that is you got to, that's a hard time to be gone for families. But maybe there's an opportunity to take 1 or 2 families, make it hey, we're going to take 3 families, and we're going to go and we're going to do these things because it'll look different. This country celebrates Christmas big time. All of the secular meanings of it, but it opens the opportunity to share the gospel in ways because it's out there. I mean, they put nativities out. It's all out there, and so maybe that is something that we can do as to say, hey, we're gonna as a church, we're gonna support 3 families. We're gonna take 3 families over there for 10 days, and this is what it's gonna look like. And that's a resource need. If we're gonna do that, we can't just say you've got 3 kids. Good luck finding $15,000 to do that. So I really don't have an answer to that, but I do think, I asked Kevin about that, and he said typically it is women. There were 2 college groups that were over there. There were 8 college students that were over there, and all of them were girls. There were a couple of men that helped out at one place, and they're on another team. So there are some men that have the opportunities, but it's just a hard thing. And so how can we as a church promote it in such a way that it drives them to say, I think maybe God is calling me to do this, because it's not a vacation. It is not a vacation. But at the same time, it's a part of something. And you think about families. I know I'm going kind of long here.
We can go as long as you need.
Okay, 30 more minutes.
Yeah.
But you think about families, and you think about the role that men play in leading their kids. When kids and their wives, and I mean, it all works together as a team. But when a kid sees their dad invested in something, I mean, kids want to be like their dad, especially young boys. Boys want to be like their dads. And if boys see their dads going and serving Christ in these hard ways, it's hard to imagine it not having an impact that's generational. Yeah, I mean, it's just hard not to. And so I think we do have an obligation to figure out, are there ways, and then what can we do about that? And so I think it's a legit question. I'm glad you asked that, and I'm glad that it's on this end of this trip. And so we've got a year or so to really start nailing things down and figuring out ways. And so
much of this podcast is like you said, leading your kids' spirituality by example. Like your kids pick up your spiritual habits because they see you do it. So if they don't see you praying before dinner or reading your Bible daily or all the things, or worshiping or singing the songs we sing in worship, or however you worship, if your kids aren't seeing that, they're not going to know where to even start, you know, and you give them a good starting point. So like you said, if you're taking your kid, if a whole family's going and doing, that's going to set an example for later on, for later generations.
Yeah, that's right. And when we talked about, an image pops into my head of sons imitate their dads. They just do. And one of the boys that was at the orphanage that was there last year that I recognized, he's a young man. I can't pronounce his name. They wrote it down and I can't pronounce it. And so anyway, so we'd finished the VBS and we sat down to eat, and I was the only one of our group that sat inside. The others were sitting out at a table, and so I sat in there on the floor, and I cannot sit cross-legged. I cannot. I mean, I have limited flexibility, and so this boy, he sat down beside me, and he's deaf, and so we had been trying to communicate a little bit, and he sat down, and I set my food out in front of me, and he motioned like for me to cross my legs, and I said I can't, and so I started eating with my legs out straight, and I brought the food up. And he was sitting cross-legged, and about 30 seconds into that, he put his legs. Everybody else, all the other boys in there, I hate emotions.
It's all right. Hey, it's real.
Yeah, it is. All the other boys in there were sitting with their legs crossed, and this little boy, seeing how I had mine out straight, he imitated me in that and started eating the same way. And then I pulled my knees up because that was hurting my knees. And so I pulled him up to sit with them up a little bit off the ground. And he did the exact same thing. It was it was cool. But it just really, it reinforced the fact as men and as dads, boys look for that. I mean, our daughters do too. Don't get me wrong. Our daughters look up to us and everything, but they're not men. They're not. They're never going to be a man. They're going to be ladies. God's going to call them to whatever God's going to call them. But boys are looking to their dads. And if we miss out on the opportunity to give men the chance to do these things, then we're failing at least half of our congregation. And so we've got to figure that out. So,
amen.
Yeah.
So, do you have any other closing thoughts you want to share?
Join us in the future. Start saving your vacation time if that's what it takes. Guys, make it a priority. Experience it just once. Like I said, it's hard. It's going to be hard on every level you can imagine. Financially, it may strain your what you think you need to have, but plan for it. We're probably 2 years before our next one, because of how things are working out. That's a lot of time to put back some money in. And first, start praying about it, and then to see, is this something that you can do? Because it'll change you. It will.
Yeah.
So
definitely impacts you.
Yeah. That's it.
All right, that's all we've got today. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on everything. It was really neat to hear your perspective and to hear what you thought and how it went and everything like that. So join us next week. We'll be doing another podcast about something. So we'll talk to you later.